Chinese have completely grind their imports to a halt in August. We expect also very low imports of US crude oil into China next month.
By mid-2025, China had quietly erased American oil from its shopping list, cutting daily purchases from 160,000 barrels to almost nothing. There was no warning, no statement, no speech, just a 10% tariff and silence. While Beijing was locking in multi-year oil deals with Russia and Iran, the man in the Oval Office, Hayden Yuan, was still talking about tariffs like it was 2018. Ports in Texas stood half empty, pipelines slowed to a crawl, but the West Wing's focus was busy fighting Canada over lumber and ranting about wind turbines. He called it leverage, but the rest of the world saw it as America stepping out of the game. Now, the world's biggest oil buyer is gone, and America got outplayed by its own salesmen. China's 160,000 barrels a day wasn't a flood, but it justified billions of dollars in Gulf Coast export infrastructure. Terminals were expanded, pipelines built, and tankers lined up like rideshare drivers outside Texas refineries. Then, in February 2025, China's 10% tariff hit and orders stopped cold. Storage tanks that used to turn over weekly sat half full. Pipelines meant for Asia ran dry. This wasn't sabotage. It was strategy, a quiet rerouting of the future while America's commander-in-truth Social congratulated himself on trade wars that aged like unrefrigerated milk. China didn't walk away alone. Mexico and Canada began building the Northern Corridor, a billion-dollar logistics route bypassing U.S. ports entirely, redirecting over $120 billion in annual trade through their own Pacific and Atlantic channels. The plan? Keep supply chains moving without touching American soil. The U.S. was once the center of global trade gravity, the dependable middleman. Now, allies are linking arms and sidestepping the one threatening tariffs at every turn. This wasn't just the loss of a customer, it was the unraveling of America's reputation as a reliable partner. After cutting off U.S. oil, China wasted no time. Beijing expanded long-term supply contracts with Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran. Prices were competitive, volumes secure, and payments avoided the US dollar entirely. Most deals were settled in yuan, removing the greenback from the equation. This wasn't a quick fix. It was a complete rewiring of the import system. Trade lanes, contracts, tanker schedules, refinery configurations, and payment networks, all tailored to handle Middle Eastern and Russian blends, not American crude. Back in Washington, the self-proclaimed master dealmaker was still blaming Canada for lumber prices and railing against windmills. The rest of the world had moved on. Even if U.S. oil was dirt cheap, China's system couldn't take it anymore. It was now built for other suppliers. Ports, pipelines, and refineries were all incompatible with American crude. Trying to sell to them again would be like forcing a square peg into a round hole and bragging about inventing the hammer. This shift wasn't only about oil, it was about currency. By July 2025, most of China's long-term contracts with Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE were priced in yuan. Every barrel priced outside the dollar weakens Washington's ability to enforce sanctions, dictate trade terms, or even track global flows. That's not a side effect. It's the point. Iran slipped in through the back door, using its shadow fleet and falsified shipping manifests to push millions of barrels to China's teapots, small, private refiners who care more about price than paperwork. By mid-2025, Chinese imports of Iranian crude had surged to 1.7 million barrels per day, 10 times more than what they ever bought from the U.S. So, the U.S. tries to isolate Iran. Iran bypasses sanctions, China embraces them, and the result is America becoming irrelevant in an industry it once dominated. If this were a board game, Iran just skipped ahead, grabbed all the oil cards, and flipped the table while the president bragged about the last round. Sanctions don't work when others ignore your rules, especially when you keep rewriting them mid-game. Meanwhile, U.S. export terminals built with China in mind now sit underused. Billions invested in pipelines, docks, and storage have become some of the world's priciest lawn ornaments. Energy dominance only works when the biggest buyer still wants your energy. Without China, redirecting to Europe, India, or South America helps. But none match China's scale, price, or influence. Ports without purpose, pipelines to nowhere, and a White House convinced it's winning the trade war. This is where short-term thinking and tariff obsession have left us. While America built infrastructure to sell oil, China built reserves. By mid-2025, Beijing's strategic petroleum reserves covered over 3 months of imports, well above international averages. Their suppliers? Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Not exactly America's closest friends. This was about more than security. It was leverage. Full tanks and long-term deals in yuan mean China can control prices, withstand shocks, and brush off U.S. pressure. Meanwhile, Washington debated refilling its own reserves, assuming the president remembered they existed. While Beijing's tanks filled, America's biggest export became denial. The oil world wasn't just changing, it was being restructured. India signed new long-term Russian contracts in yuan and revived old Soviet shipping routes. Southeast Asian buyers were adjusting purchase frameworks to favor suppliers with flexible, dollar-free payments. Europe kept buying American oil, but used the competition to demand lower prices and better terms. The rules had changed, and America wasn't writing them. Where was the man who promised energy dominance, still pointing fingers? While the rest of the world built trade corridors and secured supply, Washington was stuck in 2019 speeches. Control, once lost, doesn't announce its departure. It just stops returning your calls. No summit declared the end, no sanctions signaled defeat, no late-night tweets announced a loss. The world didn't kick America out. It simply rearranged the table and left us off the guest list. At Corpus Christi, cranes sit idle. Offshore rigs are quiet. Contracts once printed in English are now in Mandarin and Arabic. No shots fired, no flags burned, but the result is the same. America has been sidelined, not by enemies, but by a world that no longer sees us as essential. Canada, our neighbor and ally, has even rerouted oil exports toward Asia and Europe, citing instability from US-led tariffs. So, China left, Iran stepped in, India adapted, Europe leveraged, Canada walked away, and America stood still, calling it a win while the market moved on. This wasn't a hostile takeover, it was a silent exit. The real question now is, what happens when the rest of the world gets used to living without us? The answer won't come in a headline. It'll arrive in silence and in contracts that no longer need an American signature. Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time someone taxes trust and calls it leadership.